Hi, EDCI 322. I'm Candy, and I'm going to be covering my portion of our descriptive writing lesson. Today, I'm going to cover an activity that you can do to introduce your students into the concept of descriptive writing, and I'm also going to be covering technique number 5, talking about dialogue listed in our textbook. So the activity that you can do that I think would be very beneficial into starting to introduce students to this concept is a sailboat activity. I've done this with a group of college students, but I've never actually been able to teach this to elementary school students. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a sailboat. You could do this with any image. When we taught this lesson, we used many different images, but we found that the sailboat was the easiest for the artist to understand because of all the geometric shapes to it. So what you're going to need is 2 people to a group. One's going to be the artist, one's going to be the describer. 1 blank piece of paper goes to each artist, and 1 pencil goes to each artist. The students are going to stand back to back. I recommend the artist using a clipboard since they are going to be standing, and make sure that you emphasize the fact that the describer is not allowed to just say, oh, you're drawing a sailboat. This is what we're going to draw today. They have to describe the image without giving away what the actual image is to the artist. So definitely make sure that that point is clear, because that would just basically ruin the point of the description. And so when you're done, when all students are done with their drawings, collect all of them, the originals and the artworks, and I would put them under the projector and then have each group, they can either come to the front of the class or just raise their hand when their image is up on the board. Just have them discuss what worked well, what didn't work well. If their descriptions were good enough, then chances are it's going to look very similar to the original. And if the describer didn't mention how big the first triangle is, chances are the entire picture is going to be skewed. So just have them talk about, the difficulties that they have with this activity, and then they will hopefully be able to understand how important descriptions are when it comes to writing and speaking. So these are the 5 descriptive writing techniques mentioned in our text. 1 through 4 are covered by my peers, and I will be covering number 5, which is dialogue. So Tompkins goes over these 3 subcategories when talking about descriptive writing dialogue specifically, so I'm going to be looking at each one a little bit more closely. So the first point is to make speech patterns distinctive. When people talk, it's very clear that everyone has their own distinctive speech patterns. So what I would do to teach this is maybe the day before you're going to do the sailboat activity and introduce descriptive writing, have the students go home, and when they're sitting around the dinner table, listen to the different ways their family speaks. Maybe their sister says like a bunch before she's about to speak. Maybe your student's mom says a lot. And have them come in the next day and just discuss what they hear. And then make the point that people all talk a lot differently, so characters should as well. This distinctive speech patterns makes it for the author to avoid saying, mom said this, mom said this, mom said this, over and over and over again whenever he or she wants the mom to be saying something. It should be clear to the reader that mom just said that statement based on the different distinctive speech patterns that the author has set aside for mom. And also another point is, depending on where you are in the world and where you are in the United States, people are going to be pronouncing things differently. So just think that in mind, keep that in mind when you are preparing your piece of writing or your student's piece of writing, that they should keep in mind about location, because if someone's in the South, maybe they'll be saying y'all a bunch versus New York City. Chances are they may not be saying that. This website I actually used in my linguistics course a few months back, and it's a survey telling you where in the US it seems like you are from based on the way you talk. So that was what I answered when I originally took it, that I normally address people as you guys. It says that I'm very similar to the majority of the West Coast, which I live in northern Idaho, so that fits. Basically, you get all the way to the end and it tells you the 3 cities that it thinks you are from based on your answers to that survey. I think it said that I was from Nevada, which I found surprising because I'm not. So it's obviously not going to be perfect, but that could be a fun activity for you to have your students do so they understand location is going to affect the way that their characters in their descriptive writing should speak. The second point Tompkins makes is to use substitutes for the word said carefully. Obviously, there are plenty of different ways that an author can say, this character said blank. Put them all right here, all the ones that were listed in the text. And she definitely states that you should use these tags cautiously because a reader can get distracted on all the different numbers, all the different types of ways the author used to say the word said, and they're totally missing the dialogue. So said is a perfectly fine word, and if you are using distinctive speech patterns for your characters, you don't need to use the word said all that much. So definitely use these substitutes carefully and relay that to your students that just because there are this many different ways to say this person said this doesn't mean you need to use all of them, especially in one piece of writing. And the last point Tompkins makes is to punctuate correctly. Punctuation can greatly alter the dialogue in a text. The author's use of commas, quotation marks, question marks, exclamation points, and periods can completely change what they are meaning to say in their dialogue. For example, let's eat grandma versus let's eat grandma. This first one would put your piece of writing into a horror category versus a nice family dinner category. So that definitely is a great example to show your students of how punctuation completely alters the meaning of a dialogue. Here's another example: woman without her man is nothing, or woman without her man is nothing. Another one is it's time to eat, children, or it's time to eat, children. Again, thrown into a completely different horror category with your writing. And so students, especially with this grandma one, they're gonna giggle, they're gonna be like, oh, they ate grandma. So I definitely think that you should point that out to your students, that your punctuation and your dialogue can greatly alter the meaning. So that's it on my portion of our descriptive writing lesson. I hope you guys learned what Tompkins was trying to say in that sailboat activity. Again, you don't have to use the sailboat. I just think that's a great image, and it's a great way to introduce your class into descriptive writing.